At issue this Sunday, 30 days out. At long last, the presidential race reaches the home stretch.
The debates are over. From here on out, it's just retail politics, rallies and ads, and maybe a surprise endorsement or two. Are there any undecided voters left to persuade?
Plus misinformation, disinformation, it's all running rampant in this final month. We'll speak to a journalist who's checking facts for a vital voting block. At issue starts now. Good Sunday morning and welcome to another edition of At Issue. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Corey Smith.
And I'm Sue O'Connell. We've got a panel of political observers who will look back at the vice presidential debate and look ahead to the final 4+ weeks of this most unusual presidential campaign.
Yeah, we've got a lot to get to, but first, let's take a look back at what was at issue over the past week.
Israel is vowing to respond to Iran's missile attack in retaliation for Israeli operations in Lebanon.
So we know at least 180 missiles were launched into Israel yesterday. Many of them were actually intercepted by Israeli and U.S. military forces.
The latest on Hurricane Helene. Storm-related deaths have now risen to 183, and President Joe Biden has directed up to 1,000 U.S. troops to assist in aid efforts.
Governor Maura Healey taking executive action so a sweeping gun reform bill is now in effect. She signed an emergency preamble yesterday, which allows that bill to take effect weeks ahead of the normal 90-day waiting period. Legal troubles for Donald Trump continue this morning as the Justice Department makes a new argument against him.
Well, guys, one of the key lines in this filing is that the special counsel's office said former President Trump resorted to crimes to try to stay in office after he lost the election in 2020.
The dock workers' strike is over. The union says an agreement has been made, at least for now.
So a busy news week, to say the least, and a lot of those issues could have an impact on the presidential race, chief among them the response to Hurricane Helene and the wars in the Middle East.
And the one and only debate between the major party vice presidential candidates. We have a group joining us on the set to talk about the polite exchanges between Governor Tim Walz and Senator J.D. Vance.
First, our Matt Pritchard looks back on the more memorable moments from the debate.
A face-to-face matchup,
Governor, Senator,
between two vice presidential hopefuls, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, sharing the debate stage, diving into policy and the threat of a broader war in the Middle East after Iran launched rockets into Israel just hours before.
We will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
It is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys.
Switching to the issue of reproductive rights.
In Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade.
As messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions.
The southern border and a bipartisan immigration bill voted down in Congress.
Donald Trump said no, told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue.
Now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation.
Plus, a back and forth centered on the 2020 election.
Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
Each candidate also addressing previous comments. Walz, when it comes to claims he was in Hong Kong during Tiananmen Square demonstrations.
I got there that summer and misspoke on this, so I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests.
J.D. Vance acknowledging past criticisms of Donald Trump.
When you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people.
Reporting for At Issue, I'm Matt Pritchard.
All right, so joining us to talk about the debate and everything that comes after it is Janet Fogerty, the Republican National Committeewoman for Massachusetts, who was just elected to the RNC's Executive Committee. Jennifer Nassour, former state Republican Party chair and host of the Political Contessa podcast. And Jaquetta Van Zant, Democratic analyst and host of the Politics and Prosecco podcast. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. Janet, we'll start with you. Senator Vance become a bit of a punching bag for Democrats ever since he was announced as Trump's running mate. What did you make of his performance during that debate? Did he help himself, hurt himself, what?
Oh, absolutely helped himself. I think that he showed the American people just what kind of a person he is and how he would be as a vice president. He was respectful, he was intelligent, he was poised. He did everything he needed to do for the Trump-Vance campaign.
Jennifer, was it a kind of performance that you wish the guy at the top of the ticket may deliver, especially just the way it was delivered?
Yes, very much so. I mean, Vance was a much more eloquent version of Trump. And I think the version of Trump and the version of a leader that we would like to see, someone who is respectful, came across clear and concise. Listen, does this move the needle at all? No, it doesn't move the needle at all. I don't think it changes anyone's minds. And I don't know if it will affect those voters that don't know what they're going to do. However, what it did was it reflected really positively on the Trump campaign, which is exactly what Trump needed, was to show that he can make good decisions. Just as he picked J.D. Vance, he's going to pick a strong cabinet that's going to be smart and going to do the right things for his administration.
Jax, I want to ask you about J.D. Vance's performance as well, but also Tim Walz. We heard some criticism on the left that Walz wasn't tough enough on Vance. What did you make of both of their performances?
Well, I got used to the circus, so for this to be a very, as Jen said, it was very respectful, and I think that these are two candidates that spoke very well, but I don't think that Tim Walz was as strong as people needed him to be. I don't think it's going to move the needle on the Democratic side either. Look, I think J.D. Vance is a snake oil salesman. I think he proved that when he was up there. I think what his advantage over Trump is that he's smarter than Trump. And he knows how to talk directly to that base of people that they are trying to bait. And that worked in his favor.
All right, so one of the many things that none of us can control, and especially if you're running for president, are events that happen in other parts of the world. Of course, this past week in Iran, Iran targeted Israel with a rocket attack. We had a deadly hurricane. Jaquetta, if you were advising Vice President Harris on this, how would you tell her to split her day job as Vice President of the United States in the Biden administration, along with her night job or other job running for president?
I think it's so difficult. First of all, I definitely think that the right needs a new lesson in what happens with the vice president's role. They keep trying to make it seem like she's not doing enough, but she has limited power as vice president. There are certain things that the president is supposed to do. I think she should, in her day job, sit there, take as many notes as she can, be a voice, be at the table, and that will help her when she's now in front of crowds rallying to say, look, this is what I am doing as my role as vice president here at the White House and talking about these issues. The hurricane being one of them, because we're going to see more of those in the next couple of weeks.
What do you think, Jennifer? What should she do? I mean, it is true the vice president really only has two jobs.
That's true. However, we have not seen or heard from the President of the United States, especially on all of these issues. I mean, you very rarely see Joe Biden. You don't see him out and about. He's not out giving public statements all the time. And I think that right now, a lot of people are concerned. Who is actually driving the ship? Who's controlling the country? Who is giving the orders? And so that's the vice president's role. If the president is not doing it, where is the vice president? And is she sitting in on those important meetings and making sure that she's with FEMA, but she's also making sure that our military is up and running and strong and our borders are safe and that our allies feel that they're secure with us?
But how do you square that, the whole where is Biden thing, with multiple Republican governors and officials in these hard-hit states saying federal government is giving us everything we need? I just spoke to the president. He said if I need something, I can ask him. Vice President Harris follows up with the call. The director of FEMA follows up with the call. Does that argument hold water that just because he may not be out there on camera doing it, he can pick up a phone, he can call these guys, and they are saying he is helping out?
Well, going to what Sue asked before, then in her second job, in her night job, why isn't she just showing up in front of cameras? Why isn't she in front of press gaggles? Why isn't she doing things off the cuff? Everything Kamala Harris does is very scripted, is sitting down and is with people she's comfortable with instead of just going out there, coming off of a plane and giving remarks.
Well, she did go to Georgia and serve meals, and she did give her remarks to, I mean,
that's why I think it's just a talking point. As you see, Jen, who's so good at pivoting.
I am not a Trump talking point.
No, not a Trump talking point.
We're going to have to be careful there.
That was a cute pivot. So once that was called out, then it was like, well, she's actually not doing this. So it's like, there is no answer for this because the government is doing what the government is supposed to do, not necessarily zeroing in on what Kamala is supposed to do.
We never want to say our candidates are campaigning on a crisis, but we have seen Donald Trump as well responding. I believe he went to Georgia. What role, as a former president, can he play in this situation? And yes, how may it benefit his campaign as well?
Yeah, well, it's horrific what happened, and you know, the people in the region are really suffering. And you know, for President Trump to, along with Elon Musk, to provide services with Starlink is really what's needed there. But for Kamala to go there and offer $750 and, oh, you have to apply on a website that people don't even have power to do so, is really not helpful. And I think that those people suffering, plus Americans across the country, the voters, are seeing that, you know, what the Biden and Harris administration has done and offered in the past 4 years and what they are right now for those people suffering is just unacceptable. And FEMA coming out and saying, we can't afford to have another storm. We have one more storm, we're bankrupt. Meanwhile, all this funding, all of our taxpayer dollars are going overseas for the Ukraine war.
But we're talking about two different pots of money. That's DHS money helping migrants. FEMA money is very different.
But the American voter, this is what they see.
But I think the American voter also looks at Speaker Johnson and him saying, "Oh, I think we can wait before we vote on a supplemental budget to help FEMA get the money to these folks," and the president saying, "No, let's do this now." Right? I mean, it seems like. Again, it's a crisis situation. Things are changing on the ground.
People need relief right away, immediately.
Absolutely.
All right, let's pivot to some foreign policy. Jennifer, Nikki Haley was among 300 foreign policy professionals who endorsed former President Donald Trump last week, citing his foreign policy record. When a voter goes into the voting booth, or when a voter is looking to decide who to vote for president, how important do you think foreign policy is to them? How important do you think the Middle East is to them for a general voter?
Well, I mean, I think it depends on, you know, who you are and where your interests lie. I think for one of my girlfriends whose cousin was killed, was one of the 6 that was killed 2 weeks ago and was found at 79 pounds and 24 years old, it's ridiculously important. Right? You know, for me as a mother, to make sure that my kid overseas is safe, to make sure that my kid who's in a major city is safe, make sure that our borders are safe, and make sure that I can put gas in my car to take my other child to soccer is super important. So I think it depends. It's not a blanket statement of what's most important. I mean, we see over and over again, the economy is number one. That is number one for everyone. And I think, you know, foreign policy, immigration comes in there and is part of voters' decisions.
Jax, we just heard 2 points of view. People on the ground in Georgia, they want that Ukraine money, right? But Jennifer's talking about how we need to make sure that people overseas are protected. How do you thread that needle between these 2 opinions, that we should, you know, take money from foreign aid, and how do voters go in and say, well, I want to protect my best friend's family, but at the same time, I need money from FEMA?
Well, I think it's interesting. It seems like the Ukraine issue it only matters when it's now. Like, you know, Ukraine had been coming for years. We said this on the last show, that this has been happening for years. All of a sudden now everyone's so focused on this. So you can't say we want to be a superpower in the world, but we can't send aid over there when we need to fight a war. So my position is, pick your struggle. And I don't think the Republicans are doing that very well. And I'm so sorry, Jen, I didn't know that's terrible. But you got to pick a struggle. I believe that the economy is at the front of everyone's mind, myself included. And so that is where I'm gonna vote.
In 15 seconds, if you can, has the Democrats' Gaza problem gotten better or worse over the last 2 months?
I think it stayed like this. I really don't think it got better or worse.
All right. We know that politics can make for strange bedfellows. We saw last week Kamala Harris being endorsed by a Republican congresswoman who's also the daughter of a Republican Vice President, Liz Cheney, joining her on the campaign trail. And I believe we have some sound that we can play from her address.
I love it.
I am a Ronald Reagan conservative. I believe in limited government. I believe in low taxes. I believe in a strong national defense. And I believe that the private sector is the engine of growth of our economy. I tell you, I have never voted for a Democrat. But this year, I am proudly casting my vote for Vice President Kamala Harris.
Jennifer, she's talking to you. She is talking to you. She doesn't agree with Harris' policy, doesn't agree with the Democrats, thinks the situation is dire. Is that resonating? We're seeing Nikki Haley voters for Harris launching ads all across the swing states. There's going to be a number of former Republican women who worked for President Trump holding a fireside chat next week. Is that appealing to you? Where are you right now?
Well, I'm different than the normal voter, right? I mean, I'm super involved, engaged, and well-read, and I think everyone should be, and I think everyone should go and vote, and that's one of the problems and why we're in the situation that we're in. So let's go back to the facts. The facts were Kamala Harris was not elected in a democratic process. Joe Biden went through the nomination process with 14 million people who voted for him, and less than 7,000 at the DNC voted for Kamala Harris. That doesn't feel democratic. On the Republican side, when you see states like Massachusetts, where 24% of the electorate comes out on Super Tuesday and votes and launches their vote, then you do not have a really great election system or really great choices. And so we're stuck with the choices that we have. I think at the end of the day, those 20% that say that they're undecided, they don't know who they're voting for, are actually lying. I think that many of those voters are actually voting for Donald Trump. They don't want to say it because they don't like his tone, they don't like his tenor, they don't like his demeanor, and they're embarrassed to say that they're voting for him. But they like his policies because they feel as though the Biden-Harris administration has let immigration go wild, has let inflation go crazy, the economy tank, and they feel scared. And that is why they're looking for Donald Trump. And I also don't believe in endorsements. I don't think endorsements move the needle with those undecided voters.
Janet, I saw a lot of Republican white men in Wisconsin yesterday that wear their phones on the side of their saying they may not say they're going to vote for Harris, but they're definitely not going to vote for Trump. Is the Cheney message reaching some Republicans?
I don't think so. I don't think so at all. And I agree with everything Jen just said as well. I think when it comes down to it, when the voters, whether they're sending in their ballots or voting early or going on election day, what they're going to be deciding their candidates based on, are they better off now, today, or were they better off 4 years ago under a Trump administration? And I think the answer is that they know that they were better off under a Trump administration, and that's why he will be reelected.
Because he had Obama's numbers.
Jax, for a long time, we've heard folks on the left saying, stop trying to go after that disaffected Trump voter. Shore up your base. They don't seem to be doing that. They seem to actually going hard at these swing voters, these Nikki Haley voters who are disenfranchised, or not disenfranchised, it's the wrong word, who are kind of done with Donald Trump. Do you think it's a strategy that is working?
I think it is. What I love, and I share the Nikki Haley love. We've always said she's very smart. What I think is, you know, Liz Cheney being a Republican, who's a Reagan Republican, I think that matters. We're going after that base of people, the moderate thinking, the logical kind of Republicans who do believe in smaller government and fiscal responsibility and keeping it there. We do not believe in the new Trump voters who are hateful and their rhetoric is dismissive and divisive. And especially amongst white women who really got in tune once the IVF issue came to the front. And look, we welcome them in, absolutely. But, you know, listen, Liz Cheney, I love her, you know, but for Dick Cheney to turn on Trump, when Satan turns his back on his very own work, I think that that's an issue. All
right, we will have to leave it there. Janet Fogerty, Jennifer Nasor, Joquetta Van Zandt, thank you all for being here. We really do appreciate it. All right, up next, the group working hard to stop the wave of disinformation aimed at Spanish-speaking voters.
We'll speak with a journalist who's using social media apps to fact-check information for Latinos here and abroad.
Welcome back. Election Day is just 30 days away. So if you haven't already, be prepared to be inundated with ads and social media posts filled with lies, misinformation, or disinformation. And it's not just your strange uncle or neighbor spreading these lies. Former President Donald Trump did it last month when he repeated false claims about people eating pets in Springfield, Ohio, during his debate with Vice President Harris. It was a claim that originated on Facebook and was amplified by far-right social media personalities and influencers. Of course, many media outlets identify and call out obvious mis- and disinformation, but there's also a nonprofit media organization working to inform Latino voters, and it's called Fact Chequeado, which I believe means fact unchecked. Its co-founder and CEO is Laura Sommer, and she joins us now. Laura, thanks for being here. I want to start here. What does your organization do to help counter false or unverified information?
We do lots of things. One of them is helping people to better navigate this information, helping them with tools on media literacy content that can help them to identify and also to not necessarily share the content that is false or misleading. And in lots of cases are trying Spanish speakers living in the US just follow a lie. We also produce content that we publish on our website and share it with, I have a map behind me with some of our allies. We have nowadays 110 allies around the country in 23 states plus Puerto Rico. We produce high quality content in Spanish, and it's not just that we produce text, but we also produce videos for social, cards for WhatsApp that you probably know it's a tool or a platform that Latinos that speak Spanish use a lot to discuss about politics.
How beneficial is that? Because obviously the internet is a very big place. Social media is a very big place. So you all have this WhatsApp chat bot where people can actually send in things that they see or they hear, and you guys will help them sort of walk through to verify whether it's true or not?
Yeah, that exactly how our number works. We ask our community to send us what they suspect about or what they don't know, if it's real or fake. And the reason why we ask people to do that is because we need to react as soon as we can against this information. We need to start debunking and help people to be, in a way, inoculate before it's too late, before the lie is just so viral that the harm is huge. And then we ask people, not necessarily journalists, not necessarily detectives or attorneys, just doctors, dentists, workers, Uber drivers, etc., to send us any content that they receive and they suspect about. They can suspect because they don't know it is an image that has been AI created, or they can suspect because they don't know if it's come from a reliable source. And what we offer them is an immediate answer if we already fact-check that story or that narrative. If not, our newsroom receives the request and we try to verify if the same narrative is also spreading in the open social networks. If the same narrative it's in a video in Facebook or YouTube, or if we can find it in TikTok, then our newsroom prepare a story, a fact check, and we go back to the person that ask us that question to say, here is the answer to your question. Please share it again with the group where you receive it.
Does the diversity of the Latino community in the U.S. make your job difficult when it comes to tackling that misinformation?
Yeah, for sure. And you are addressing one of the probably most complex topics that we are, or challenges that we are addressing, is the conversations are pretty dispersed in terms of Latino communities in the U.S. It's not necessarily the same conversation or the same narrative that Mexican in Texas or Cubans or Venezuelan in Florida are discussing about, or Puerto Rican or people from El Salvador are discussing or talking in New York. That's why it's pretty important for us to build a community and to focus on this strategy that was successful outside the US, in many countries in Latin America and also in Spain, to create a network in WhatsApp with people that can help us to identify quickly what are the narratives that are spreading, what are the conversations that need more context information or contextual information, to fill in advance the gaps of information in Spanish, that if we don't fill it with good and quality information, bad actors just jump in and take advantage.
All right. Laura Sommer of Fact Checkiado, thank you so much for joining us on At Issue. It's a very important conversation, and we really appreciate the time.
Thank you.
That's it for this edition of At Issue. We'll be back next Sunday. Thanks for joining us. I'm Sue O'Connell.
And I'm Corey Smith. Enjoy your day.